Hello. Okay. Hi. My name is Ms. Metters, and I'm one of the counselors here. Thank you for attending our financial aid night. We are just some housekeeping for you guys. There's a bathroom down the hall on the right. It's like just past the double doors. And then we have Angela from Seattle U, who's going to start our presentation. And then we also have Bradley Llewellyn from Seattle Promise, who will also be a part of our presentation. For our online participants, you're welcome to drive in school because it's so fun. And it just ask questions. We're kind of moderating the chat as we're presenting. So for our online participants, just continue to ask questions in the chat. And then for anyone here, feel free to ask questions. We'll try and make sure that if you ask a question to say it and then answer the question as we go. But I will let you get started. And hello and welcome to our financial aid night. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, and you're going to do that.
Yes, so I have my lovely necklace here. So welcome everyone. My name is Angela Wittig.
Oh, wait.
Yes.
There is scratch paper in the back if you should want it. And then we also have like a financial aid brochure thing in the back should you want it as well.
Awesome.
Okay, now you're good.
Perfect. Now, so like I was saying, my name is Angela Wittig. I'm a financial aid counselor at Seattle U. I've been at Seattle U almost 10 years now, and I've been a financial aid counselor for almost 20 years. I worked on the East Coast for about 10 years before moving to Seattle. So I'm just really excited to be here. These are one of my favorite events to connect with students and families. I think you'll find our presentation really helpful in the sense that we try to keep it as general as we can to really give you a lot of good information to navigate the financial aid process, no matter what schools you're considering along the way. So I'm just going to jump right in. I think you'll see like generally how we get started is we try to cover as much information as we can. I think just hold any questions for the end and enter them in the chat. I think you'll see that most of your questions will be answered, but know that there will be time at the end. If you have things we haven't covered or individual situations that would be helpful to talk about one-on-one, I'm also happy to jump in and talk with anyone in that way as well. So without any further ado, so what are we going to talk about today? It's really our financial aid 101 tonight. So we're going to talk about understanding the costs, what students pay, applying for financial aid, and covering your costs. So I won't spend a lot of time. I'm trying to go through each slide to really get into how this is applicable in a lot of different scenarios. So hopefully you'll get a lot of good information. So first, we're just going to talk about understanding your costs. And when we're talking about understanding costs, we're going to talk about direct costs, indirect costs, and a total cost of attendance. So a direct cost, when we're talking about direct costs, it sounds pretty straightforward, but we're talking about the tuitions and fees, housing and food. So for most students, those are the charges you're going to actually see on your account at the college or university that you're attending. But when you're also looking at different colleges and universities, we want you to start thinking about the overall cost of attendance, and we'll talk more about that. So that would include things that we are calling what are indirect costs. So that's like books and supplies, your transportation, personal expenses. So, personal expenses, when we're talking about that, it's, shampoo, the occasional pizza on Friday night, just, these incidentals that you'll have on top of these standard costs that you'll see. And when you add all of that together, you're going to get your total cost of attendance. And clearly some of these indirect costs, if you're seeing local, may be lower compared to if you're considering a school that is across the country. So you'd be looking at airfare and all of those other items as well. So how much does college cost? Each institution will be able to provide you with all of that different information. So the school type really will vary quite a bit with those costs if you're looking at a community college versus a state school or a private institution. And your location and your state of residency also can come into play when you're looking at those different items and the financial aid that you qualify for. So let's just look a little bit more closely about that. So we want to be as transparent as we can. So we're providing, some of our peer institutions here in Seattle. So clearly, when you're looking at this, the estimated costs at a community college like Seattle Central Community College versus UW or Seattle U, you'll see there are very different costs, and we'll explain why those costs are different. And why you also shouldn't be immediately shocked by sticker shock, because right away when you see Seattle U's cost, it's much higher than the two other options here. But that's not to say that it's out of reach for students who have a good amount of need, and there's a lot of different options that you can tap into to make that cost much lower. So we'll talk about all of that. But before we get into it, I just wanted to touch on the fact that so clearly for community colleges and state schools, there is a different cost for residences, pardon me, for students who are residents within the state of Washington compared to out-of-state students. The reason there's a different cost is essentially community colleges and state schools are subsidized by the state of Washington. They get tax funding, and that's why there are different rates for students who are in state versus out of state. Private institutions don't have that, and that's in the shortest explanation why our costs at an independent university are higher than the other two options. So let's dig into this a little more. So what are we paying for? Why are those costs so different? So let's just take a look. So every university is going to be transparent with this for you. So these are really the things that you should see at any university. So you're going to be clearly paying for tuition. You'll probably have some fees at Seattle U. For instance, we have a wellness fee, a technology fee, and a matriculation fee. For new students, we have a one-time new student orientation fee. And then in our direct costs, we're always going to provide information about average housing costs, as well as food and potentially loan fees, because if you tap into loans, there's fees attached to that. We can talk a little bit more about that in the future. But again, we want to provide this information so you have a really good idea of what those direct costs look like on average. Then again, we're talking about indirect costs. So these are the things that you would not be paying to a university directly, but they are things that you'd want to consider, that you will have to have some money on the side for books and supplies or transportation, depending how far you're traveling back and forth, as well as some personal expense funding just for your students to get those incidentals. So when we're looking at Seattle U, of course, the first question on everyone's mind is am I going to pay over $70,000 a year for my education? Yikes. Rudy says no. So Rudy is our mascot. We try to keep this a little lighthearted, and let me explain why we say no. So if there's one thing you take away from this presentation tonight, we want to make sure that you take away that you always want to be looking at the net price when you're comparing different schools. The net price, essentially what that means is the price after subtracting out any scholarships, grants, loans, whatever type of financial aid that you either qualify for or opt into using. And the reason it's so important, the net price can be vastly different than what most people refer to as the sticker price, when you just see those costs line up. So just like it has here, essentially the net price is your tuition, living expenses, your fees, your miscellaneous supplies, and transportation. So you want to take all of those things together, and then you're going to subtract out your financial aid. And we'll talk a little bit more about that again. So the next question clearly is, how do I cover my net cost? And I'm going to talk about some of this. Our colleagues here on your counseling team will talk about some other options once I get through my portion as well. So first and foremost, complete the FAFSA. Probably most everyone has heard this already. If there's another thing I'm hammering home, is definitely complete the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. The FAFSA, no matter what your family's income and asset level is, we always strongly encourage every single student and family to complete the FAFSA. The FAFSA is going to help us in our office determine and offer you the most generous aid package that we can. And it will qualify you, if you are able to complete the FAFSA, it will qualify you for any federal grants as well as any state funding. And we'll go into a more detailed breakdown about this in just a moment. The other thing that we will talk about a little bit tonight, that I'm sure if anyone has been following the news, this is going to be a big year for some big changes coming down the line for filing the FAFSA. For the first time in many years, the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, has done a major FAFSA overhaul. It's called FAFSA simplification. And essentially, it should, in the end, just make the whole FAFSA application process much more streamlined for students and families. And all of the webinars and all the training that I've been attending has been telling us reliably that it should result in, for the vast majority of students, more funding in their pockets. Again, we'll go into a little more detail, but you probably have been hearing about this. So it's another thing we're excited to talk about and answer any questions that you might have. Clearly here, we're telling you to complete the FAFSA, and I'll just quickly, go through the who, what, when, where, and why. So who, you and your contributor, that's who you would complete. You'll see, like in the past, if you've had students in school, the lingo has changed a little bit with FAFSA simplification. It would always say you and your parents. Contributor is what the new lingo is for the new FAFSA. And essentially that just, for most cases, it's still your parent. But there's a few different complications that we'll go over in a little bit more detail that can change for some families. But essentially it's anyone supporting your family behind the scenes, including the student. So what, clearly here the FAFSA is accepted at just about every university. So when you're doing the FAFSA, you would be submitting that to all the different schools that you're considering. You complete it during your senior year of high school. We have the web address there. And again, it will be checking your eligibility for state as well as federal funding. And for a lot of colleges, it will also tap into seeing if you qualify for additional institutional funding from the colleges that you're applying for as well. So how do you know if you're eligible to file the FAFSA? So pretty straightforward. Most students and families can file the FAFSA. You can file the FAFSA if you're an eligible citizen or non-citizen, which could include permanent residents or approved refugees. Excuse me, you can file the FAFSA if you have a high school diploma or an equivalency, and if you're seeking a degree. It really is that simple at this point. But don't despair. What if I don't qualify for completing the FAFSA? The first thing we want to tell you is just don't panic. There are other options for Washington State residents who may not qualify to file the FAFSA for those reasons. And that resource is called the WSHS. So that's through the state of Washington, that there can be different state funding that students can tap into if you're not qualifying to fill out the FAFSA. So again, who is for students who are not eligible to fill out the FAFSA. And this application, again, is accepted at all the different universities within the state of Washington. So this really is Washington specific. And again, everything else is pretty much the same. You do it your senior year of high school, and we have the web address. And again, this is specifically checking for state resources that you may be eligible for. So, of course, the next thing on everyone's mind is, what type of financial aid may I qualify for? And whether you're filling out the FAFSA or the WSHS, essentially you're going to be connecting with your financial aid office to determine your eligibility for all of these different types of financial aid. So scholarships, first and foremost, that's usually the first thing everyone's asking about. Scholarships can be based on merit or also financial needs, so that's why the FAFSA can come into play for that. And your financial aid office at your school will do a comprehensive review of that. Again, scholarships don't require repayment. We have a couple examples at our university. Our merit-based scholarships clearly are our scholarships. Our McGoldrick scholarship is for alumni of CLU. So different types of scholarships like that definitely could be a piece of the picture. Grants. Very much near scholarships, grants are different types of free money that doesn't need to be repaid. And generally, those are coming from the state or the federal government. And again, they don't require repayment. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about like a federal Pell Grant, a Washington College Grant, College Bound Scholarship through the state of Washington. There certainly are also educational loans. Educational loans you will learn if you qualify for by doing a FAFSA. Most students will qualify for some type of loan. We'll talk a little bit more about the different types of loans available to students in a following slide here. And the other thing that you will determine by doing your FAFSA is whether you qualify for work study or not. So work study, just like it says here, is a pay as you earn either federal or state funding source. It's the only thing that works a little bit different than everything else on this slide. So grants, scholarships, loans, as a generalization, will disperse directly to your student account at your university to pay for those direct costs directly. Work study generally is just a student employment opportunity that students have on campus. So it very much mirrors applying for a part-time job off campus, but they're all, for the most part, located on campus or in conjunction with the university. We just like to make that clarification that if you see a work study award on your student's award, generally they'll have to apply for a job, start working, they submit a timesheet and get paid directly for that funding that they've earned. Of course, they can save it to help pay for their educational expenses, but just as many students may save that money to help pay for books or supplies, and that's totally fine too. It's just another resource that they can tap into. So how do I cover those remaining costs? So covering remaining costs, I've talked a little bit about some of these things, but I want to talk about them in a little bit more detail because these are all standard options at most universities that you'll be looking at. Most universities will have some sort of payment plan. Certainly you can look for outside scholarships, and I think our colleagues on your counseling team will talk a little bit more about that tonight. There's also what's called a Parent Plus loan. So a Parent Plus loan is another federal loan that parents can take out on top of an aid package to help with any remaining costs, or a private educational loan. We always like to mention the loans, but I also want to highlight, just like anyone else in the audience or on the counseling team here, we strongly encourage every student and family to take the least amount of loans out that they need, but we want you to know that they are an option and that we can counsel you on the steps you need to take if that's something that is necessitated for your family to cover that bottom line after all the other types of financial aid are exhausted. I mentioned the payment plan, and this will vary from school to school, but just for instance, like I said, I've worked at a few different universities, and most payment plans, what they do at most schools, rather than all of the remaining costs being due at the beginning of the quarter, if you sign up for a payment plan, usually what it does is it breaks it up into monthly installments over the course of the quarter. So that can, depending on your circumstances, make things a little bit more bearable. And what I always like to counsel students and families about as well is a lot of families will use a combination approach. Like maybe they'll sit down and say, hey, as a family, maybe we can afford to pay $500 a month or whatever that is, and maybe do some in a loan and some in a payment plan, and making really a customized plan for you that works. And I think you'll find, as long as you are in open communication with your financial aid office, they're going to counsel you on all those options to help you find a solution that works for you. So what's next? So really the next piece that we strongly encourage is getting ready to file your FAFSA. So I talked briefly about the FAFSA simplification process earlier. Generally, the FAFSA is available to complete in October. This year it is not. Because of FAFSA simplification, the federal government is still working feverishly behind the scenes getting it up and running. But the latest guidance that we've received is as of December 31st, it will be available. Fingers crossed that's not going to change, because clearly both students and families and us as aid professionals are feverishly waiting for that. We're getting a little anxious in our world because we want to get this information into students' hands, so in turn it can get back to us so we can assist you guys. But the thing that you can do right now is get started on what's called your FSA ID. I think the counseling team here will talk a little bit more about it. It's honestly pretty straightforward. An FSA ID is really your unique ID that you're going to use to complete the FAFSA and sign it in the end. And the the thing that reason we recommend doing that now is just one step you can get out of the way and make sure that you're ready to complete the FAFSA when it's available. What I can say about FAFSA simplification, it should, once it's up and going, be a real benefit to everyone. I think it's going from, I think it was like 116 questions to 48 questions. So it's going to be faster. There's finally going to be like logic built into it, almost like if you filed your taxes online, where it will skip over questions that don't apply to you. So it really should be streamlined and ready to go once that is available. So that is definitely our advice. Do whatever you can to get ready for this so you can submit it. The behind the scenes, like in the financial aid world, what we're hearing is that December 31st, it will be open to families. They're hoping by the end of January that aid offices will be just able to start downloading FAFSAs. So just between you and I, that means that our process will be a little bit slowed down. We are going to work as quickly as we can. We're working with our software companies to get all the patches through. We're working on plans with our admissions offices to make sure that we get information into students' hands as quickly as we can. But just know that, this is not just Seattle U, it's every university across the country. Things might be just a little bit slower this application cycle based on FAFSA simplification. But we just want you to rest assured we're doing everything we can to turn around that information and get it back into your hands as quickly as we can. So when can you file a FAFSA? I touched on this already, but really December 31st is what we're expecting. So just get ready at this point. So I think at this point, we will transition. Oh, yeah, cool. You want to on the list? Yes.
Okay, and now, sorry for our online people, we're transitioning, so just give us 1 second to do that.
Oh, I have it in the marker.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. So now we're just going to go into a little more detail about the FAFSA as well as scholarships and kind of the other pieces of aid in the area as well. For those of you here, again, my name is Miss Nutters, and then we get to do a cute cuddle. So
Never mind.
the mic. Okay.
hi, I'm Miss Newman.
Hi. Shall I cuddle as well?
Well, you're
Miss Eric. Also good. Hi, I am Miss Nadine.
Hi, Miss Lynn.
Hello, I'm Miss Gabby.
And we
Just
have
introduce yourself.
also Bradley Delano. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm Bradley. I work with Seattle Promise, and I'm the outreach specialist here.
Which we will get to. If you're like, what is Seattle Promise? It's coming. Okay, so a couple more details. We're going to go in through FAFSA a little bit more. If you don't have a social security number, you will need to still create a FAFSA ID. That is a change. So there's just a couple things that are different if you've ever completed the FAFSA before. So you'll need to use an FSA ID, which does require you to select, I don't have a social security number. And then it is a 3-day wait right now for everyone who's trying to create a FSA ID. And we'll cuddle.
Okay, and just so you guys know, this was actually the same presentation that we showed to the seniors back in October. So for a lot of you, your students had already seen this. Okay, so updated terms. I know Angela hit on this a little bit, but basically the contributor, we get this question a lot from students, which parent should fill out the FAFSA if my parents are separated. In the past, it used to be the parent that you spent most time with that contributed the most financially. Now it is, they're just calling parents contributors and they're using a contributor wizard. So students will go through and answer a series of questions, and then based on that, the FAFSA will say, this is the parent that's going to be a contributor. And then just some other updated terms with the new 24-25 FAFSA is what they used to call the EFC, expected family contribution, is now being referred to as the SAI student aid index.
Okay, and so even more details about divorce and FAFSA is that, so for example, if both parents contribute equally to the student before in the 12 months before the FAFSA application opens for you, what that means is that whichever parent and their spouse, if remarried, has the greater income and assets will be the one being the primary parent of the FAFSA. So basically speaking, it's like 51% more than the other parent.
Okay, so determining who the contributor is can be kind of complicated, but hopefully this like mysterious wizard will help us. So the first thing is just starting the FAFSA, which you can do now, like Angela said, it's starting your FSA ID. And then built into the FAFSA, there will be a wizard component that can help you determine who is a wizard. So something that's new is that now students will create their own FAFSA ID or FSA ID, and then teacher parents will also create their own account, and an email will come to your account letting you know you've been identified as a contributor. Each contributor will make an FSA ID, and then you will complete the FAFSA alongside your child or student. So it's kind of this idea of instead of having to sit down around one computer together and like click through things, it's supposed to become a little bit more accessible by y'all as contributors accessing it on your own account and having students do the same. So you don't have to be physically in the same space because sometimes that can be a challenge. I think that covers that side. Yeah.
So, okay, so a checklist of what you need, like we keep saying over and over again, both the contributor and the student need their FSA ID, their birthdays, their social security numbers. Contributors, if you don't have that, you can simply check that you don't have it. Again, for students, if they don't have it, there are a couple different things they can do, including filing the WSHS instead.
Okay, so the student aid index is the number that the colleges use to sort of drive your financial aid package. So if you've ever had a student or when you went to college, if you had to do the EFC, that number was sort of the driving piece of it. It looks different now. So that is your fun journey. But it is the final piece of the FAFSA is to get to that student aid index number. Which then kind of drives everything else in terms of what she shared in terms of work study and loans and all those other components, which we're going to talk about in a second.
And then a note about the CSS profile. So this may be requested by certain colleges and universities that your student is applying to. We typically see this coming from private schools. I've had situations where students like, this school is asking me to do the CSS profile. What is that? It's a separate application done through College Board. So don't worry about this unless your school specifically asks for it, but just a heads up that they may be asking for your student to complete the CSS profile as well.
Okay, Washington College Grant. So when we talk with students about financial aid, we highlight a lot of specific grants and scholarships that, like the Seattle Promise, that we really want students to consider. And one of those is the Washington College Grant. If you see something that has a booklet, we give a student this student opportunities booklet. And we give this to all of our 12th graders, and that kind of walks through the college application process, financial aid, and all those good details. So that's what PG18 is about. But the Washington State College Grant is this commitment for mostly low-income families getting some support paying for college. And so it's just one of the ways that students will qualify with their household income.
Okay, so loans, again, that's money that you have to pay back. And there's several different types, so I'm just going to point out some of the main differences. So for federal Stafford student loans, there are subsidized, and that's based on needs, which again goes down back to your student aid index. And then there's unsubsidized, which is not need-based. And the thing to note about that is with subsidized, you don't have to like interest doesn't accrue until after graduation, where interest does accrue immediately with the unsubsidized, again, the not needs-based loans. There's also another type of loan, that's the Parent Plus loan. I think, yeah, sorry. Is there anything else you want to add about the Parent Plus loans? Just, yeah, that's something like you definitely want to do some research before you decide to do that. And then finally, speaking of research, the private student loans, again, you want to be really careful because, you know, not all of them will have like, yeah, higher, Yeah, sorry, you want to go?
Yeah, when we talk about loans with students, and we're talking about private loans, we emphasize that that is our least favorite option when it comes to paying for college because of the higher interest rates, and that we're not working typically through the school itself, right? We're working through like a bank. And so it's a whole different can of worms. And so we really emphasize our Stafford student loan subsidized and unsubsidized before.
Okay, so now we're transitioning from financial aid in terms of the scholarship side of this and how we kind of independently go through this. So we have here at West Seattle, and this is for if you have students at another high school in Seattle Public Schools, the College Bound Scholarship. This is something they would have had to sign up for in middle school. And if it was at the time, if you guys were on free and reduced lunch, it covers in-state tuition for any of the public colleges in Washington. We have pulled students down. If you want to check to be like, hey, is this possible that my student is eligible? Feel free to reach out to us and we can confirm and walk you through what that looks like with your student. All right, would you like to present, Bradley?
Oh, yeah, sure. All right. Hello again. My name is Bradley. I'm the outreach specialist. And so Seattle Promise, for those who aren't familiar, is a scholarship opportunity that was created in partnership between the city, SPS, and the Seattle colleges to allow SPS graduates to do 2 years of community college tuition free at the Seattle colleges. All students have to do is apply for the program during their senior year before our February 16th deadline. And so what we really want to highlight tonight is that as the outreach specialist, I'm actually here at West Seattle on Tuesdays here in the library. So your students are welcome to come and find me, and we can work together on getting their Seattle Promise application submitted.
Just on Seattle Promise, the FAFSA is required for that, and that can be our biggest hurdle for students. So if your student is doing Seattle Promise as a backup or as a first choice, just make sure they're in touch with us if they need support or if you guys need support getting the FAFSA completed.
We're going to talk about the Western Undergraduate Exchange Scholarship, otherwise known as WUI. So we think it's fun, so we go WUI. It's pretty fun. Anyway, it is exciting because basically what the WUI, so like, where's the lasso? I think if you click one more time, there's a small lasso that will appear in a hat. Okay, there you go. Okay, sorry. So we're excited about the WUI, and you should be too, and here's why. So the WUI is this really lovely thing where colleges in these highlighted regions can offer in-state tuition to out-of-state students. And it does not apply to every college. It'll apply to some select colleges. And what's great and also kind of funky about WUI is it's not the same deal with every school. So, for example, some students from Washington might want to go to school in Montana. Now, some specific colleges offer in-state tuition to a Washington resident in a Montana school. But if you go to the Western Undergraduate Exchange website, you will kind of learn more about how they approach WUI. Some schools automatically will give those students in-state tuition. Some of them you have to do specific paperwork or to like check a specific box. Some of the in-state tuition is like only partially covered. It's a little bit nuanced depending on what college your student is considering. And typically WUI schools won't be the biggest schools in the state. So like the University of Oregon is not a WUI school. But I think that OSU is, go Beavs, Corvallis is a lovely place. So there are, you just have to do some research, but it's really, really worth it. I think we all have these stories around students like moving to California and not coming home for 3 years so they can establish residency and get in-state tuition. And the beauty of WUI is that we're trying to avoid people never coming home. Yay, WUI.
Okay, so general scholarship information. So scholarships are free, money that you don't have to pay back. Oftentimes, they are based on your academics, your interests, maybe what your majors are, financial status, background, and more. Sometimes students just have to do some research to see how they're eligible for those scholarships. But generally speaking, colleges offer scholarships, third-party organizations, whether it's like a community center, YMCA, a church, some religious, organization offers scholarships. And on average, like I'm not over millions of dollars of scholarships go unawarded because students didn't apply. We actually had a scholarship a few years ago that was worth $10,000 for students who are interested in the veterinary programs that no student applied for. And so unfortunately that scholarship went away. And so that's an example of how many opportunities are available to students. And so we truly try to push scholarships to students, whether it's through email, we post it on our social medias, we announce it during LA classes. And so there's always a scholarship you can apply for. You just have to find them. And so a couple of slides later, we'll show you some websites that your students can go on to look for scholarships. And actually students as early as freshman year can start applying for scholarships. It might be a little bit different for what seniors apply for, but financial aid can be accessible as early as freshman year.
Okay, so just really quickly, there are kind of two different categories. There's merit-based scholarships. That's based off of the things your students have done. So that could be sports, it could be achievements, it could be special skills. There are scholarships out there for like blonde people with the first name that starts with A. You just have to like find them. And then there's also need-based scholarships, and that's based again on your financial situation.
Okay, so we get this question a lot from our students. There's so many scholarships out there. Where do I even start? And we usually tell them to kind of start small and local first and kind of get bigger from there. There are so many local opportunities, both within the West Seattle community, as well as greater Seattle metro area and in Washington. And in West Seattle specifically, our local Rotary Club gives away quite a bit of scholarship money every year. As well as our alumni organization, which I don't know, Sandy, did you want to speak on the alumni scholarship? I can kind of give them the nuts and bolts. So our alumni association awards scholarships every year, and they typically, the application goes live in what, March? Yeah, so we'll advertise to the seniors and go around to senior English classes, but usually that sure. Yeah, typically what happens is the scholarship application goes live in March. I think a big difference this year is I've heard you guys are going to make an electronic application, is what I've heard. Okay, we're getting there. So it might still be paper. Yeah, so if you're interested, you can check out the West Seattle High School Alumni Association website for more information. And like Ms. Dubuque was saying, once the students apply, they come in for interviews through April and May, and then the scholarship winners are announced in May.
Okay, so where can students find scholarship opportunities? I think someone actually asked this online, and it's a great question. There's a lot of different places to find scholarships, and it can be really overwhelming. The first thing I want to promote is our West Seattle High School website. If you go to our counseling page, and then on the right, there's a scholarship bulletin. I shared it online for online attendees, but basically that scholarship website is updated as often as we hear any scholarships in the area, and they're sent to us. So people, I mean, I think this week we've had probably 2 or 3. People from all over the community send us scholarship opportunities all the time, which is super lovely. And we post them, or Michelle Burns, our counseling secretary, will post these onto our scholarship bulletin on the website as quickly as possible. So that's like the #1 spot to look. Lots of good local scholarships specific to West Seattle. That's our first focus area. Other examples we will share with kids is Naviance. Naviance, which they are maybe like, but Naviance has this amazing scholarship search where you can like put in some of your demographical information, some ideas around like what college you might want to go to and what you're interested in, and they'll take all of that and digest it and spit out a bunch of scholarships that could fit your profile, what you're interested in, and then they'll also think about Naviance is connected to their academic portal, so they'll have their GPA, and so they'll even be able to. They'll even be able to filter with their GPA and academic information, which is really lovely. So Naviance, scholarship search, huge plug. And then lastly, but the Washboard has some scholarship opportunities as well. A lot of them are these kind of like somewhat clunky, but somewhat helpful search engines where you put in information. And so that's kind of the three to start. There's oodles more, but that can be overwhelming. So that's what it is.
Oh, no. Yeah, so this was actually, if you guys want to take a minute to pull up, we were trying to gauge if parents would appreciate like some more hands-on help in completing and submitting their FAFSA. And we may have Bradley helping us with some of those workshops. So if you would like support, like hands-on support in submitting your FAFSA, please let us know. You can scan the QR code up here that you see on the screen, and we will get in contact with you. We've been talking about maybe doing some more hands-on workshops later this winter and spring. Yes, we can get back in time, and so people can. Okay, we do sort of frame the scholarship search as your students probably have heard the story of my youth, where I was taken to an orchid show and asked if I like orchids enough to write a little essay about it and to get a $500 scholarship, which is like not a huge scholarship. However, an hour of work for $500 is a big payoff. And so we do sort of frame it as like chunking it in small little chunks of like where you're finding the money, and thinking of it as like where your ponds are. So your first pond is West Seattle. The next pond might be what school you're intending to go to. So looking at that school's website to see, are there any specific scholarships that are relevant to me from the school itself? Then we're going to look at Washington and the state of Washington to see what else is out there. And then we go to the national scholarship searches, but those are just a little bit, they're harder because there's the entire country is applying about them. So where can we find money more locally, just as it's a higher, reward typically for your time. So was there?
Oh, yeah, actually, I have a very cute story to share, which is when I was in high school, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so getting these outside scholarships were a really big deal. I just gone into like the private college of my dreams, and that wasn't going to come easy. So I think after February of my senior year, my parents forced me to do one scholarship every week. And I remember I would fight them tooth and nail, like, no way, I don't want to do this. But they made the same point. They're like, if you just write for an hour, you can get a lot of money for that time and effort. And slowly but surely, like, I didn't win everything that I applied to, but, a future educator award here, a leadership award at my Taekwondo place, a church scholarship. In the end, I actually ended up being awarded $10,000 in outside scholarships. So we really encourage you to apply to as many scholarships, as you can.
$10,000 is free money that you didn't have before. We also tell students about loan forgiveness programs just for after college, particularly if they're taking out public loans. If you join us and become school counselors or work in any nonprofit or government organization for 10 years, they can get those loans forgiven. And we do kind of walk through that with students as well, just in terms of on the other side of it. That is the conclusion of our presentation. We would like to put a plug in that at 7:30, the girls varsity basketball team is playing another team, Garfield. It's the team entitled Garfield. And you're welcome to walk over with us. But we are here for any questions that you guys have in the audience, and then we're still monitoring the live Q&A. Any questions? Yes. Okay. So the question is, do most scholarships repeat for every year, or are they only for 1 year? I will be honest, I think a lot of scholarships are for that first year, but it is really important for when you're looking at scholarships to look at if they're renewable or not, and what their criteria are to be able to continue with a scholarship. We have a famous story for, I don't know if you want to speak to a story.
Well, we usually
Oh, that's just a sad story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I lost my scholarship after my freshman year because my GPA. So I was not gonna tell that story, but I will tell the story. Which I've now, oh, I remember. Okay, great. I'll tell the story. So, when that happens where people get $10,000 for their first year and it's amazing, and then the second year comes around and it's like, what do we do? Something we encourage students to do is reach out to their financial aid office at the college. When I went to graduate school, they were like, here's the chunk of money we can give you for financial aid. And I responded, hey, like, unfortunately, that's just not enough. Like, I cannot make ends meet with the amount you've given me. And they were like, okay, like, let's look around. They chat with me on the phone. They are like, you have a financial aid officer who is responsible for you. So they want to help you and they want your money. So they'll want you to come. And they're like, oh, we found a $5,000 grant that we can apply to you. Here you go. They got $5,000 for writing one email, which was like, hey, I can't make this work. So I do encourage all students to reach out to their financial aid officers at the college. And sometimes it might be nothing. Sometimes they'll be like, please jump through this hoop. It just depends. But it's always worth asking for more.
Are ready for other questions? Want to keep on your roll.
It goes a little more in depth. Yeah, so the question was the CSS profile. If your student is asked to complete that, do they do that alongside the FAFSA or is that used instead of the FAFSA? They would do it alongside the FAFSA. The CSS profile is a little more detailed in terms of what they're asking about your family and income and assets. So you would need to complete that in addition to the FAFSA if your college requests it. Yeah, keep it going.
Keep it rolling.
Yeah, so the question is, I have a freshman in college currently and a current junior. When I'm doing the FAFSA for my younger student, will I have to create a new FSA ID? The answer is no, you'll be able to use the same one. And we actually got that question online as well. What else?
It's not all my question. I don't know. Is there, are you aware, of sending a kid to a co-op school like Drexel? Can you remember what those are? Okay, we have an online question about co-op schools that we don't know the answer to, so if you can email us because it's anonymous, we can look into it.
Okay, any other questions?
Hey, thank you all so much for joining us in person tonight. And then this presentation and PowerPoint will be posted on the counseling website in the days to come. So you'll be able to access it there. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
What's up? I saw your email. Sorry, my name is Wyatt.
No, I totally get it. So, let me.
Sorry.
Have you?
Yeah.